Drive to Survive has gotten a lot of angry comments in the past few days, mostly because they're twisting what really happened and leaving out important stories from the 2024 season. Max Verstappen has already said he doesn't like the show, but now he's talking about it even more after commenting on a picture of him at the Miami race. With all this happening, is Drive to Survive really making Formula One look bad? And if it is, what can they do to make it better for new fans? There's no question about it. Drive to Survive is a show that makes people argue because of how they show certain things on TV compared to what really happened on the racetrack. The problem got really big starting from when Norris won in Miami, a day that, if you remember, it was one where Verstappen was right there celebrating with the British driver. There were even pictures of these two having fun in Miami after the race, and Verstappen was the one saying that he was very happy that his friend and rival won a race in his career. But if you watch the episode that talks about Norris's first win, then you would find a very different story about Verstappen, a much meaner one compared to the real Max. The show went ahead and put clips from Max's reactions from the Dutch race and had Jensen Button talking in the background about how he is not going to accept the rivalry easily, when really it was nothing but made up drama from the people making the show. This is something that Verstappen has talked about. And when he addressed the situation, he said, "Apparently I was very sad after Miami. I literally had the best time ever on Sunday." This is, as I mentioned earlier in the video, not the first time that Verstappen has called out the show for creating stories that don't exist in real life. If we look at what he said back in 2023, it makes a lot of sense why he doesn't love the show, but now he's talked about how he feels towards Drive to Survive in a much quieter way. When someone asked him if he's the biggest hater of the show, Verstappen decided to stay quiet and not talk about it, which shows that he still feels the same way as he did back in 2023. There's no doubt that the show needs to do something extra compared to what actually happened on the track, because at the end of the day, it is a TV show. It needs to have exciting moments, and it needs to be really interesting so that new fans will find it more fun to watch. However, twisting the truth that much is probably a line that shouldn't be crossed. And it's creating a lot of negative feelings among the fans. Now there are tons of comments from people who said that the way Max was shown in that episode is exactly why they don't watch the show or why they don't take it very seriously. On the other hand, this is just the beginning, and there are tons of other stories that have been twisted by the directors. We're just getting started. If you watch the episode where Russell has been given the leadership role in Mercedes as the team signed Antonelli, you will find one detail very weird. The disqualification is not talked about at all. Russell did win the race with a one-stop strategy and did have amazing defensive driving against his teammate Hamilton. However, his car was illegal because it weighed a lot less than it should, which is why he got disqualified at the end of the race. In Russell's mind, he's still the winner of the race, and Wolff did say that the disqualification didn't change his mind about giving Russell the role he's going to have from 2025 onwards. But still, the truth is that he's not the winner of the Belgian race. It's Hamilton, and that fact being left out of the show goes to show exactly how important it is that the directors pay attention to these facts. However, there are a lot more stories that haven't even been talked about in the latest season of Drive to Survive, and whether we like it or not, they're going to have a bad impact on the show's believability, as if that wasn't already a problem. If you haven't watched a single race throughout the history of Formula One and want to know more about the sport, then based on Drive to Survive, you would believe that the Belgian race ended with Mercedes getting first and second place. That's a huge problem that needs to be fixed sooner rather than later, because it's definitely hurting the picture of Formula One to a much bigger extent. You can't have directors twisting and bending the truth just for likes and popularity. You can add exciting effects or maybe make something seem a bit bigger than what's actually there, but as long as it stays within the truth. For comparison, we all knew that the Norris-Ricciardo rivalry in McLaren was made bigger than it really was. But it was still somehow a believable argument because Norris didn't care about his teammate at all, which he shouldn't do in the first place, and Netflix found a sweet spot to build a story around that fact. There are other stories that haven't been talked about nearly enough, such as Hamilton's first win with Mercedes at Silverstone after 2021. It was one of the most emotional races for the seven-time world champion, And while it was covered in the episode where Netflix left out Russell's disqualification, it wasn't properly explained for the fans to understand how important this win was for the home hero. Still, we can at least say that it was talked about to some extent. But what about the stories that have changed the landscape of the sport in the future and haven't been mentioned even once, as you are probably familiar with the biggest story of the 2024 season apart from Hamilton's move to Ferrari was Newey's departure from Red Bull and him joining forces with Aston Martin. This is a move that has constantly started talks about Verstappen joining the team from 2026 onwards when the new rules kick in, but for Drive to Survive it wasn't worth covering at all. There was a good amount of coverage for Horner's internal struggles with Red Bull, but what the show failed to capture for the fans is this being the reason why people like Newey, Wheatley, and Courtney left in the first place. It also failed to give the respect that Adrian deserves. He is, of course, one of the greatest masterminds in the sport, and to see him not being covered enough and the real fans not having more insight as to why he decided to change his environment after 20 years is definitely quite disappointing, apart from that Newey is now a very influential figure in Aston Martin, and with him having a great say into the team's operations. You would probably want to know more about the nature of his contract and why he accepted these terms in the first place. These are the things that real F1 fans want to watch, and for example, we didn't really have enough coverage of Behrman's debut in Saudi Arabia either. This was the race where a young driver proved to the entire Formula One world that he is the future of the sport, and this is the race that brought him to the seat in Haas. Furthermore, Behrman is the only rookie to score points with two different teams in a season in the history of the sport, as he also went on to score points with Haas in Baku. But this was definitely not the most interesting part in the heads of the directors of Drive to Survive. There is no doubt that people are now starting to get very angry with the direction that Drive to Survive is slowly but surely moving towards. And whether we like it or not, there needs to be a lot of discussion on this matter. Fans are expressing their anger on Twitter, as well as other social media platforms, and while you can just sit back and not watch the show at all, it wouldn't create too big of a problem, because there are, of course, still people feeding themselves purely on this show's information. Nobody is arguing about the influence that Drive to Survive had on the growth of the sport, because it offered this unique opportunity to have a bit of a sneak peek into the drivers' personal lives, but to twist the truth that much just to get a bit of exciting drama is not the foundation that you want to have moving forward. With all this in mind, what do you think about the 7th season of Drive to Survive? And more importantly, do you think these mistakes should be talked about to a greater extent? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to know more about Cadillac's potential lineup from 2026 onwards, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.